I wanted to solve a problem that personally affected me, that I had a personal attachment to. The perfect use case is actually my father. So I actually built ColegaAI for my father. So my father owns a restaurant, and every single day he's calling me, hey, we have a customer asking me, how do I tag them? How do I repost? How do I, do more things on social media? So he's calling me all the time, and I'm explaining to him. Then I thought, okay, why don't I just build an AI that can help him do this for him?
Jayo. Jayo. Ganbare. Ganbarimashou.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Jayo. Okay, so you can come. Thank you so much for attending today. So I'm so excited to hear about your journey. So what do you do in Tokyo and Taipei, Eric?
Yes, so I am the co-founder and CEO of ColegaAI. ColegaAI. We are building the first AI agent that automates SNS marketing for small business owners. And the reason why we're doing this is because it's very difficult for small business owners to do social media marketing. Current tools on the market were not designed for them. They're designed for professional marketers, and hiring a marketing agency is also just too expensive. So we think that AI and AI agents can be the solution to that problem.
I see. So is this ColegaAI is B2B, business to business product?
Yes, correct. It's B2B, but it's not enterprise. We focus on the small businesses, the owners of your favorite restaurants, bars, cafes. For us, it's about democratizing AI and bringing AI to typically non-technical small business owners.
Thank you so much. And so it's your second startup, right?
Yeah.
Why did you start? Did you come up with this idea, ColegaAI?
Yeah, so this is my second startup, and when I decided to start my second startup, so building a startup is a lot of work, right? It's very stressful. It's like almost raising a child. So I didn't want to just get into a second startup just for fun or just because there's an AI wave happening. I wanted to solve a problem that personally affected me, that I had a personal attachment to. So I'm actually a third generation restaurant owner.
You are?
I am, yes. Yes, I am. Yeah. So my family has been in the restaurant industry for a very long time now.
In New York?
Yeah, in New York, correct. In New York. And also in California. Yeah, so I have a restaurant in California as well too. So for me, I wanted to work on something that I have a genuine passion for. Right, that I can wake up every single day and feel excited and feel passionate about solving this problem. And I think for founders, the best way to do that is to solve a problem that you experience firsthand. So I experienced it firsthand, so I'm super passionate about building this.
I see. So thanks to your family business restaurants, so you often see their real pain points, correct?
Yes, I see their pain points every single day because I experience them myself. But the average small business owner, at least in America, is anywhere between 50 to 65 years old. So this is a generation that was not really born with technology in their hands, right? Gen Z now, their cell phone is like their third arm, right? But for the older generation, that's not the case. And traditionally and also currently, a lot of tech companies just neglect this population. They don't want to sell into them because I think it's more difficult. It's more difficult than selling into enterprise. And that's the audience that we're tackling.
Thank you. So and also maybe many audience, we want to know like a kind of example, like use case. So could you please tell us the example?
Yes, the perfect use case is actually my father. So I actually built ColegaAI for my father. So my father owns a restaurant, and every single day he's calling me, hey, we have a customer asking me, how do I tag them? How do I repost? How do I, do more things on social media? So he's calling me all the time, and I'm explaining to him. Then I thought, okay, why don't I just build an AI that can help him do this for him. So I built it for him, and then other people in his network started using it as well too, right? So then I realized that it's actually a real validated problem. It's a business problem. What started as more of a trying to help my family became a real business now, and now we're helping small business owners. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So literally, thanks to your father, every day you could do usability testing and user interviews.
Yes, correct. I think the best way for us to find our customer is, can Colega be so simple that even my father can use it? Someone who is so non-technical, who hates technology, can he use it? Can he naturally use it? And if he can't, how do we change things and improve the product so that he can naturally use it? And so that's kind of our TA, right? And it's been fantastic so far.
I love that because, as a UX designer, product manager, and engineers, so we tend to make team with only technology native, right? But real end users, they are not maybe young generation, under 40, maybe around 60s, 70s. They don't have good eyes. So if our product or website has many text, they don't want to scroll. Give up, right?
Correct. I think too many people are so familiar with designing and building for enterprises. And that's such an easy path to take, right? Because there's even templates now, right? When you build websites, you build apps, there's proven templates for enterprise. But there's not that much information for small business owners and non-technical people. And a lot of times you see these tech companies that chase after enterprises, and they realize that the sales cycle takes way too long and it's not as easy as they think it is. Then they immediately have to tackle SMB, the small businesses. But the problem here is that their product was designed for enterprises. So what do? They remove some features, they limit some usage, and then put on a small business label on it and then try to sell it. But it never works because the adoption and the use case for small businesses and enterprises are completely different. How they use and how they absorb technology is completely different. So it's important for founders or tech companies to build for SMBs from the ground up. And that's what we're doing at ColegaAI. Everything that we do, every UI change, every button, everything is customized from the ground up for the small business owner.
Amazing. I want to try to use.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So, okay, let's talk about your team. So do you have your co-founder, Eric?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have two co-founders. I like to say they're much smarter than I am. My co-founder, Daphne, is our chief marketing officer. She was head of BD leader for Uber and Uber Eats for APAC. And then my CTO, Caden, he was a Entrepreneur First alumni. It's a startup program based in Singapore. And he also built a lot of SNS tools and SNS marketing platforms in the past. They're really smart people, very lucky to be working with them every single day and to push and challenge ourselves every day.
I see. How did you meet your two co-founders?
Yeah, actually, it's a funny story. So, my CTO, I've known him for many years now, 5 or 6 years. I met him at Hackathon in Korea. So we love in Korea. Yeah. So he's not Korean, I'm not Korean, but we just really love hackathons. And there was a really big one in Seoul, and I went there, he went there, and then we met each other from there. But this was years ago when we weren't starting building a company yet. So we kept in touch, always bounce ideas off each other, and just became really good friends. So he ended up being my CTO. Daphne is someone that I really look up to, someone that inspires me a lot. Funny story about that is when I moved to Asia to build Colega, I wanted to find an advisor first that understood the Asian market, how to sell, how to market. And so Daphne was originally our advisor. Yeah, so she joined us as an advisor. And since she was at Uber Eats and Uber, she saw their users using our solution. and then realized how impactful it was, right? And then, she took a leap of faith. She quit her big, comfortable job at Uber as a leader to join us full-time as a co-founder, and it's been great. So I think there's no better testimony than someone joining because their customers are talking about us or liking that, are liking our solution.
And then, so you guys, like three of co-founders, started to ColegaAI. You guys established a company in Taipei.
Well, actually, so we are technically a U.S. company because this idea was born out of my experience in the U.S. But then we realized that we wanted to be in a market and markets that F&B culture is really, really big. Food culture is huge. And there's really no better place than Taiwan and Japan, right? So that's how we expanded. So we have operations in Taiwan, and then we now have operations in Japan as well, too. Mm-hmm.
How about product team? Where?
Most of the team is actually sporadic, so we're a distributed remote team, but most of our team is based in Taipei.
I see. So no employee in the States?
Not right now, but it's not meant to be that way. It wasn't intentional. I think for us, we just want to find the best candidates, and the best candidates can be anywhere. Right? At the end of the day, it's about finding people who are passionate about what we're doing, passionate about building, and want to be a part of something very special. And so far, it's been people that we met in Taiwan, and who knows, hopefully it'll be Japan and US as well too.
I think our audience, they want to join your team. So,
Yes.
So what kind of role are you looking for?
Yeah, so we're always hiring just for really, really good people, right? I mean, I'm a big believer of not rejecting people just because you don't have room for them, right? I think it's very difficult to find truly talented people. So when we come across them, we want to hire them. But with that said, we're hiring for AI engineers, machine learning engineers, marketers in Japan. I would say probably BD and marketing in Japan is our priority right now. So if any of your audience is looking for position at a startup, early stage startup, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you.
I see. Thank you. Okay, so you are serial entrepreneur who loves mentoring,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I knew, before I met you, I found, Eric, definitely he really loves supporting people and also, what can I say, other founders. And then you are so open-minded. So let's talk about, I want to talk about two topics. Sorry.
Okay, it's
So
okay. Yeah.
one, so as a hiring side, what is your priority? For example, the person who has big title already, like ex-Google, or personality, or I don't know, something like a friends referral. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think for us, we look at results over resume.
Results.
Yes, over resume. Meaning, we don't care if you went to Harvard or Princeton, right? These top schools. We want to work with people who are builders at heart. So have you had side projects? Do you do hackathons? How involved are you in the tech community? I think that's more important to us than anything else. Because like myself, I'm a founder, but I didn't go to an Ivy League university, right? I went to a pretty normal university. But there was talent everywhere. So definitely we don't look for people who have big names on their resume. Some may have it, but at the end of the day, it's about what is your passion and what is your ability to deliver results and to build. And that's what we look for too. So it doesn't matter whether you come from Google or a very small company in Japan. If you're talented and if you want to build with us, we want to hear from you.
I see. Thank you. The 3 key takeaways from the conversation with Eric, part 1. 1. Making AI accessible for small business. Eric's company, ColegaAI, focus on helping small business owners like restaurant and cafe operations who often find current tools too complicated or expensive. Example, Eric built ColegaAI for his father, a restaurant owner in New York and California, who struggled with managing social media tasks like tagging customers or responding. These personal connections inspired a simple AI solution designed specifically for older, non-tech savvy business owners. 2. Creating user-friendly solutions for non-tech savvy owners. ColegaAI designs every part of its platform to be simple and intuitive for people who aren't familiar with technology, like Eric's father, who became an early tester. Example, many tools in the market are built for professionals, but ColegaAI focus on small business owners who need straightforward features to help them, such as automatic social media update without requiring them to learn complex systems. 3. Hiring passionate problem solvers over fancy resumes. ColegaAI prioritizes people with a passion for building and solving problems rather than just looking at impressive educational or career credentials. Example, Eric's CTO Karen joined the team after they met at hackathon in Korea, where they shared enthusiasm for creating solutions stood out. His CMO Daphne left a leadership role at Uber Eats to join ColegaAI full-time because she believed in the company's mission. Okay, thank you so much for watching our episode today. We hope today's conversation will help your future and career. If you like this episode, please subscribe it and give you a like. Okay, bye bye. じゃあね。